Jaden, you and I are huge fans of ElevenLabs. We think it's just an absolutely phenomenal product. This product has been around for a while. It is essentially just a voice, sort of like it just mirrors your voice. I've tried it out. Had it for $5 a month, and I remember trying it out last summer. And it says like, "Hey, record like 5 minutes of your voice," and I did. And then I typed in text, and I brought my son, and I'm like, "Hey, listen, I'm just gonna like tell me how this sounds." And he's like, "Oh yeah, that sounds pretty good." I'm like, "That's not me." And he's like, "What?" And that was last summer, Jaden. So ElevenLabs has made a big splash of late, unicorn status. What has sort of been on your radar about this? What's exciting to you? Like, because this is really, really cool.
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, it's pretty impressive the fact they went from like $100 million valuation when they did their last round of funding like 6 months ago to they just raised at like a $1.1 billion valuation. So that is like a massive 10x. And I think both rounds were led by Andreessen Horowitz. So obviously top tier VC fund. It's interesting like that they jumped in at, I always find it interesting. So like it makes sense, right? If you're like, oh yeah, we're doubling down because we believe in this company, so we're going to give them more money. But it's like, the last time they invested, they're already making a 10x return. So I guess, I don't know. It's impressive, and maybe that's just part of the strategy. If they lead the next round, then they're locking in the 10x valuation. And so they definitely like made their money with the new people. Anyways, I'm sure there's a whole VC strategy on that. But absolutely incredible. Hit $1 billion valuation. They announced a bunch of new features here, which are pretty exciting. And I learned a couple interesting things about them. Connor, you and I have been talking about ElevenLabs for a long time and saying they're like pretty much our favorite audio, AI audio kind of tool. It's like one of the very first APIs we actually added onto the AI Box platform was like ChatGPT, Dolly, and ElevenLabs. And spoiler alert, getting their API is actually really hard. But I mean, if you're a developer, good luck. You'll be able to do it. I'm sure. Hopefully, they make this thing easier. But it was pretty gnarly. But anyways, we got that on there, and it's been amazing to be able to use it. It's a fantastic tool. I've cloned my voice too. They actually got it. So it used to be 5 minutes. Now it's like you can, in like 1 minute of recording or less, like they can clone your voice. It's so crazy. But what have you been seeing about the new features they've been announcing on here?
Yeah, I was just reading about this. I mean, so here's the thing, like, Jaden, you're like sort of like the podcast king, right? You have the biggest podcast on AI, like on the planet, everything else. I'm just sort of like obsessed with like how well they do it, how well they, track your voice, track your tone. I've heard your sort of ElevenLabs stuff. I'm like, I literally can't tell that's Jaden. But then when you start to think about like just bigger studio implications, and this goes to just so much. I mean, you start to think about like, Hollywood and everything else, and just like what voiceover is going to be. It's going to be completely changed. And the one that I was looking at was this dubbing studio, right? So Jay, none of you saw this, but like, I'm just like kind of reading about this. This is the thing that automatically transcribes your content, translates it into new language, generates a new audio track in that language. And one of the cool things I was reading about this is that like each speaker's original voice is, and this is sort of the slightly technical part, but it's like it's isolated and then it's cloned, before generating sort of like the translation to sort of like ensure the authenticity, right? So this AI can like handle like fully mixed, fully mastered audio with multiple speakers. And this is the other really cool thing when I was reading about this, it like separates like the speakers from the background at an extremely high quality. It keeps the soundtrack and the like the sound effects, all that stuff, it's like intact, all that kind of stuff. It separates out individual speakers, even though they're overlapping. I mean, these are things that, again, we're just at the beginning of this, but just the technical ability of this. ElevenLabs is not a big company. And the fact that they're going to do this, like, even if it was just this, last year, this would have been headlines in the New York Times about how this would have changed essentially a ton of forms of entertainment and everything else. What's been like, have you, I know you probably haven't tried that out, but you do a lot of this kind of stuff. Like, what are you seeing around all that?
No, I think it's phenomenal. Like this technology seriously has massive impacts. Their dubbing studio that you're talking about, like it can dub an entire movie. And I think this is actually when the founders were talking about ElevenLabs, and this is the reason they started the company to begin with, was because they're both from Poland, and they're like, the dubbed movies in Poland are like terrible, and we wanted like a better solution. So they built this whole AI voice thing, and now they've finally kind of come back to like the core purpose of why they started the company, which was for better dubbing. But I think there's a lot of really big implications. So there's a couple other technologies that are doing this. One that you and I have both talked about and tried is HeyGen. And I don't know if you saw over the last couple of weeks, there was this viral clip from HeyGen of the president of Argentina. I can't, Malay something, I forget, but he was at the World Economic Forum and he gave this speech that just like went really, really viral. But one of the things that went so viral about it was he's from Argentina, so he doesn't speak English, but they used HeyGen. I'm not sure if it was HeyGen, the company that did this, or someone else, but they immediately took his speech, put it on HeyGen, and had him talking in English. So it was his exact same voice, his exact same accent, his same tone. It's so much better than dubbing because it's no longer like you're listening to someone else's voice that doesn't look like it matches that person or whatever. Like it's literally the person and they're speaking another language. And so his clip went super, super viral. I honestly think it was like amazing publicity for HeyGen because everyone's like, this cool new AI tool like translated the speech, which like speech has nothing to do with AI. It was like a World Economic Forum speech. But yeah, so I think this is really big. Like you're going to be able to listen to essentially the leaders of every country, whether that's political, technological, business leaders, like religious leaders, like whatever, any country, any place, you're going to be able to hear them. And I think it's the technology is becoming more and more intuitive and the friction's lowering to the point where like someone gives a viral speech and immediately it's trending in like every language. I personally think this is cool because I think companies like my last company, Self-Pause, the #1 AI life coach, we had a whole bunch of like positive affirmation meditations on that app. And one of our big problems was like, we got like 120,000 users, but these are just English speaking people. It was a lot of work to get, people in studios to record these affirmation sessions in a whole bunch of categories. Like, and eventually we created such a big library that like, if we're going to switch to another language, it was just going to be a big ordeal and we never got around to it. But with a tool like ElevenLabs, there is no reason why you couldn't, like, #1, with permission from the original person, get the voice that like you like that we liked in English in every language, or just other voices. And so you essentially can go from having something in one language to like 120 languages, or I think something crazy like that they're doing. So really excited about that.
It's wild, right? And of course, the two things about that, right? I mean, like #1 is you forget like how embedded in your mind it is. Like if you see, the president of Ukraine speaking or something like that, like you see him and he's speaking in Ukraine, and then like there's like a woman or a man's voice kind of like talking over, and you're just used to that. Like imagine now, like if you hear him speaking, for example, for us, like in English, same tone, same inflection, same everything. It's just one of these things where this is what's so interesting about generative AI to me, is that like things that you didn't even know were like, kind of a pain because you're just so used to them. Like all of a sudden it's like, oh, we don't have to like live that way anymore. And also then, but it also does create a lot of ethical issues, right? Like, so politicians in New York, I'm trying to remember who it was, but it was sort of like recording things like, I don't know what tool they were using, but, in Spanish. And then for some people, they're like, this is great. This, calling around and he's talking in, in my native language or whatever. But some people are also like, hey, this is misleading. It's like he speaks Spanish. It's just going to like raise all these ethical kind of like interesting issue. Obviously, like the Biden phone call in New Hampshire sort of like threw a ton of people off. I listened to it. I was like, holy cow. So there's just going to be a ton of that. Like if like it's the easiest thing in the world to call somebody and have this thing. Now with latency, obviously you can do that. But with anything recorded, and especially with like movie voiceovers, this is just going to be one of these things where sort of like it's kind of like a quiet thing. It's like, oh, I knew they were already doing this. But like what ElevenLabs is doing in terms of the quality. And again, it mimics, even like right now, it would be mimicking, and this is not ElevenLabs, but it would be mimicking like, my pauses and tripping over my words and all that kind of stuff. And I've heard you talk about that too, about keeping that level of authenticity in something that you found so powerful, I think.
100%. Yeah. So phenomenal. Really excited for that. The other thing that I wanted to bring up that they also announced, and I think this is really big, is a voice library marketplace. So you can go clone your own voice, put it on there, and charge people to essentially use your voice anytime they need to generate something. This is so fascinating. My question to you, Connor, is like, would you ever clone your voice and put it on that marketplace?
Jaden, I was thinking, I heard this too, and I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, in what? I mean, look, they must understand the business model way better than me. In what universe am I doing that? Do you know, like, in what universe am I saying, like, hey, use my voice to do anything? And somebody's like, hey, I'm a stupid idiot who, like, is, like, super, like, an awful person, and I, kick dogs. Like, when is that somebody ever going to use that it's going to make me sound good? Now, again, I'm not Morgan Freeman, right? I mean, like, and so, there's definitely things, but, like, nobody wants my voice other than to do something like, nefarious with it. Now, again, they know their business model better than me. I'd be very curious to ask them, but like, I don't know. Would you like? What's your thought on that?
Well, okay, so my thought on it is it's an amazing product. I don't know if I personally would put my voice on it, but like I want there to be a lot of other good voices on there. And point being, like, with and again, bring back to self pause, like we had a bunch of voice actors that I found that were like amazing. I got them to record like 6 or 7 different like full categories of like meditations. And then like, 6 months later, we got a writer that wrote us like another 6 categories. And I went back to them. I'm like, hey, can you record all of our new stuff? Like we want to add some new content. And like, they just like ghosted me on Upwork and never heard back from them again. And I'm like, dang it. So I literally like pulled them off the app and had to find a new person to start from scratch to do all 12
Wow.
from scratch. Right. Because it was like, we wanted you to be able to like, if you like a voice, you could listen to everything in that voice. Right. And so it was like, it was a big bummer, but that's where I think a marketplace like this would be amazing, is like you could just pick someone and no matter what, if they quit the industry, if they go do something different, like if they leave it available, like you can always get that voice for whatever your continuous projects, whether that's like a faceless YouTube channel or like maybe like, I mean, I just think about like some of the, like for example, what's the car insurance company lady?
Oh, like Geico
Flo
or something like that, or
Well, yeah, so
Progressive, yeah.
Progressive. It's always got the same lady, and then there's like
Yeah.
the dude with the mustache that's on Liberty Mutual. Like they like have their guy. Okay, so like what happens if one of those? I mean, this sounds morbid, and so I don't know, whatever. But like if someone got like injured and was unable to like record, it would maybe slow down a campaign or something, and this would be like a great tool for that. Or you really love the voice, and I think about it. That's the positive side of it, but then the negative side, where it's like I'm not going to put my voice on there, is like I don't want someone to like have 11 labs and be able to like call my family members with my own voice and do that kind of stuff. Or even like, I mean, like my podcast is like I have like the biggest AI podcast. What if someone just started an AI podcast and they just like use my voice for it? Now it's like, also it feels like I'm endorsing like every product or project or concept that my voice is used for. So it's just like, I don't know. I think there's like a certain type of person that could get away with it. I don't know if that's me though.
Huge trouble. Absolutely. But you're right. I mean, animated, do you remember sort of like you're a kid and like there's a famous person doing the animated feature, or, you know what I mean? Like, and then they make a TV show and it's like some knockoff person. Like, yeah, all those things go away. And again, it's just one of those things like translation, like everything else, that you're never going to sort of like ever hear again, like a male Japanese prime minister, and then sort of like the soft voice of the female translator. I get like those days are gone, and it's a funny thing to sort of like the thing. You and I both have kids, like telling our kids like this is what this used to sound like. It's just kind of like this. I think this is a moment in time where everything's going to change.
Yeah. Okay. One last thing I want to bring up. They also showcased that it's an early preview, so this isn't like fully in there yet. But it is the mobile app reader that essentially enables instant conversion of text and URLs into audio. So like this is really cool for people with like disabilities, for example. You find a URL of a website, you put it in there, and it's going to automatically be able to like create an audio file and read you essentially all the text and content that's on that page. So I think that this is really cool. Personally, I have a brother that is like dyslexic, and has a really hard time reading. He's making amazing progress. He's doing a great job, but he's like, I think 11 years old. And it's so fascinating because he's super, super smart. So like IQ is super high, but it's interesting because when I see him, he uses all of these different tools. So like when he's like coding and programming and makes his video games and engineering, like really smart kid. But like when I watch him try to figure stuff out, he's like on Google. He uses voice to text for all of his searches. Right. And then he has like a plugin enabled that reads off of the page for him. And so he's like, or he copies the text off of a page and posts it in there to read for him. Like, anyways, he's really smart and he's like so fast blazing around with the stuff. But I just think some of this stuff is really, really amazing for people that might struggle in certain areas to have some of these tools embedded and like working in real time, because like currently it's like you copy and paste, you go to a website, you paste it in, you like click listen, it takes a minute to generate, it's a little bit robotic. But like if you have something in real time that like you load the page and it instantly starts reading it, for example, or however you set up the settings, I think this is amazing for people, for accessibility, essentially.
Yeah, it's such a good point. And this is the thing we think about a lot if you sort of like have a relative or have a loved one that thinks about there that has to sort of like endure something like that, and the rest of it are just like, oh, this is like really cool, but you're right, this is going to be absolutely life changing for tons of people. Like there's a ton of stuff that's coming out from AI, and generative AI and OpenAI and ElevenLabs and everybody else that are actually going to make actual impact in people's lives that we don't tend to think about. So I love that you called that out.
Yeah, super, super excited for this. ElevenLabs, again, they've been a favorite of ours from the beginning, and it's exciting to see them grow. Congratulations to the whole team over there on a $1.1 billion valuation. I think this is just the beginning for them. We're going to see them turn into an absolute juggernaut in the audio space, and for good reason. I think they're high quality and a great company through and through. So it's going to be exciting to see what they do. But if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to leave us a review on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcasts. We really do appreciate it. And I hope that you all have an amazing rest of your day.